Okay, hi everybody. Thanks once again for coming. I've given up tweeting now, but if any of you can still be bothered, the hashtag is VEM. And please don't forget to put your email address on the mailing list, which is over there on the corner of the bar. Okay, for those of you that weren't here earlier, my name's Daniel Arlington, and I work at the Open University. I'm officially an applied linguist, but I research relationships between cultural producers and cultural consumers. So cultural sociologist is probably a better term for me these days. Within cultural sociology, a lot of work has been done around a distinction that many of you will probably find intuitive, which is between something that you might call popular, mass, or commercial culture on the one hand, and legitimate, intellectual, or elite culture on the other. Legitimate culture is understood to mean art for art's sake. It means writers writing for other writers, musicians playing for other musicians. Production for producers, in short. Producers are understood to compete with each other for one another's esteem. And naturally, there's no money in that, at least in the short term. Waiters waiting on each other's tables, essentially. However, in the long term, and those of you from my sort of disciplinary background will recognize that I've been reading too much Bourdieu. In the long term, the most esteemed producers are understood to be sort of sanctified by the educational system. So they end up on the school syllabus 20 years down the line. School kids end up answering questions about that work in their GCSE or their A-level exams. And in order to pass those exams, they have to buy the books. So you can make money like that if you last long enough, and if you are the sort of last person standing in the sort of rough and tumble of the field of restricted production, as Bourdieu called it. Mass culture, on the other hand, is understood to mean art for the sake of making money. It means that producers compete with one another for the largest possible audience. We're interested in electronic music because it's one of many forms of cultural expression that doesn't actually fit that pattern. You'll often hear people sort of decrying the commercialization of electronic music through something called EDM, for example. But the truth is that even the most commercial forms of electronic dance music, there's virtually no money for the producers involved. Hardly anyone is actually even able to make a living. Some people, of course, make a lot of money, but not very many. And outside of those most commercial forms of dance music, there's even less money. So you have, again, like in what I called earlier, the field of restricted production or legitimate culture, you've got producers producing largely for each other, producing for the esteem of other producers, of other esteemed producers of electronic music. No money so not much money in the short term, but equally, probably no money in the long term, because there's virtually no chance of ending up on the school syllabus 20 years down the line. And audiences somehow manage to keep up with these producers, even though nobody's teaching this stuff in school. So this is the kind of thing we're interested in. We're looking at how audiences value electronic music, how producers value each other's electronic music, how DJs value the electronic music of particular producers by including their work in their sets, how producers value each other's music by working together. And to be honest, I find the whole process beautiful, which is really why I started putting the project together back in September. And Byron and Anna are now going to explain to you some of the things that we've found out over the last few months.
Hi, I'm Byron Dueck. Work at the Open University in the music department. As Daniel's been explaining, we're interested in valuing, and specifically valuing as a verb rather than value as a noun. We're interested in the ways that musicians express or make gestures of appreciation to other musicians, the way that audiences let musicians know that they're interested in what they're doing. And we're also interested in the ways that those things happen both online and off. And so to this end, we're looking at a number of sites of investigation, and I'll mention just a few of those now. One site, of course, is listening in live contexts, the kinds of contexts that Luis was talking about a little bit earlier. One area of particular interest to me is the ways that audiences make it known to musicians that they appreciate what they're doing. One of the things that's interesting to me is to watch the ways that audiences, say, will be oriented to a DJ. Are they dancing with one another? Are they watching the DJ? Are they letting the DJ know that they're into what he or she is doing? A second site is one that Anna will be talking about after me, and that's sites of online interaction between listeners, between producers. As we'll hear, musicians and listeners let one another know that they like one another's work through likes, reposts, comments, follows, various other ways in online forums. Again, here there's any number of things that we can investigate, but what's particularly, one that's particularly interesting to me is the way that people can manufacture a sense of being appreciated by others. So the way that it's possible to buy likes or buy follows or carefully cultivate the number of people who are following you, and the ways that musicians are actively involved in managing their online appearance. There are older offline ways of doing this. Those of you who are familiar with the history of opera will know that there's a thing called a claque, and what the claque is that composer or a singer will bring in a whole troupe of people to the opening night of a performance, and they clap at all the right places, and they scream and shout, and they call, encore at the right moments. And in fact, they're managing their success through slightly shady means. So what's interesting to me is that this kind of management and this kind of careful caretaking of your persona or maybe your reputation is also going on in the online world. So that's the second side of investigation. Just to mention a third side of investigation, it has to do with relationships. One of the things I noticed in the few interviews that I've so far conducted is that when people start talking about valuing, they often end up talking about the relationships that they have with the people whose music they value. So people talk about collaborations, people talk about supporting, and they talk about those things in both online and offline contexts. So there's a third context that I think is really interesting for investigating in terms of valuing. And a fourth might be called valuing knowledge, valuing particular ways of understanding how to make music, the technical aspects of making music. People understand these kinds of knowledge to be valuables, and they actively court people. They pursue relationships in order to figure out, how did you make that sound? How did you do this, or how did you do that? So those are just a few of the areas that we're interested in doing work, and I think, as Daniel said earlier, or Luis, we've got a sign-up sheet there on the bar. If you'd be interested in talking about the music you value, the musicians you value, and the musicians that value you, we'd love to talk to you and interview you. So just sign up on the sheet back there. All right, I'll pass it over to Anna.
There we go. So one thing that I would like to draw your attention to is the project website, which tells you a little bit more about what we've been up to. There are flyers dotted around the place. There's a few on the bar by the sign-up sheets with the project website. I'd like to show you a little bit of the data we've been working with. If I can see. There we go. There we go. So, we have been working with a website called SoundCloud. Some of you will be familiar with it, some not so much. It's a website where people can upload their tracks that they've produced. People can comment on the tracks, they can like the tracks, they can follow the particular musician, they can show their appreciation, their value of someone in various different ways. And as Byron said, it's the relationships that we're interested in that are developing on this social media site. So these relationships that are developing online and how they correlate with what's happening offline in the real world. Okay, so I was very pleased to see Winterlight use this visualization and others in his wonderful performance just now. What's happening here is we're seeing activity in SoundCloud. All of the little circles are tracks that are being uploaded by the little people that are users. The clusters of circles connected together that you see, that's one user's tracks all together. So that's a little snapshot. I'm going to run a little longer. Okay, so let's look at this in a little bit more detail. The little green flashes are people creating tracks. What's interesting to us at the moment, and one area of interest, is the little brown flashes that are coming from the users to the tracks. What this means is that people are having, they're commenting on other people's tracks or commenting on their own tracks. And as you see, there's a whole hive of activity here, all interlinked. And we're trying to find out what's going on here. And perhaps, for example, the user, just the brown user, just over to the right here, you see him constantly commenting on his own tracks. That's him having conversations with people who are commenting on his tracks. And this idea that people are commenting and building up relationships through engaging with each other's tracks in this way, this is something we're focusing on. So although we can analyze this by running pretty visualizations, what we're doing is following up on things that we're finding out through people that Byron have interviewed, and then looking to see how we can find out more about how people show value for each other within the SoundCloud network. So this is just one of the areas that we're looking at analysing, and we'll talk a lot more on the project website about various other areas of analysis.